I woke up to the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. At first, I didn't even understand where I was. My eyes opened slowly, as if someone had glued my eyelashes together while I slept. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar white, harsh, too bright. A fluorescent light flickered in the corner, making a faint buzzing sound that scratched against my nerves. The air smelled like antiseptic and something colder, almost metallic, like fear. I tried to move my arm and felt a sharp tug and IV line taped to my skin. My throat felt raw, as if I had swallowed broken glass. It took me nearly a full minute to realize I was in a hospital, but I had no memory of how I got here. No car accident, no sudden illness, no fall, no injury, nothing. Just emptiness, like my brain had been wiped clean around the edges. I turned my head slowly to the right, hoping to see something, anything that would explain what was happening. But the chair next to my bed was empty. The curtain was half drawn, swaying slightly as if someone had been there just moments ago. My heartbeat quickened. Where was my husband? Where was anyone? I swallowed, wincing at how painful it felt. "Hello?" I whispered, but my voice came out brittle and weak, barely louder than the beeping monitor beside me. Nobody answered. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, heavy and disorienting, but I forced myself to stay awake. I needed answers. I needed to know if this was real or some twisted dream. I closed my eyes for a second, and then I heard it. A voice. A very familiar one. "She'll be gone soon anyway." My entire body froze. That voice belonged to my mother-in-law. She wasn't in the room, I could tell by the echo, but she wasn't far, probably right outside the door. My room was quiet enough that I could hear the muffled sounds from the hallway, like a cruel reminder that the world kept spinning even though mine had stopped. Then came another voice. Lighter, younger, with that distinct irritation she always carried. My husband's sister. "Did the doctor say how long? Because honestly, I don't want to sit around here all day." My breath caught in my throat. Were they talking about me? I stayed completely still, afraid to move, afraid to make a sound. A cold, prickling sensation crawled up my spine as their footsteps clicked closer to my door. I could hear the mother-in-law sigh dramatically. "The doctor said it's a matter of hours, maybe a day, and the sooner we finish arranging everything, the better." Arranging what? My funeral? Surely I misheard. Surely I was still half-conscious, delirious, imagining things. But then my sister-in-law laughed, actually laughed. Well, at least she won't need anything expensive. No point wasting money on someone who, didn't even leave us anything. The air in my lungs turned to ice. They were talking about me as if I were already dead, as if I were nothing but a burden they wanted to be rid of. My heart hammered so loudly, I wondered if they could hear it through the door. Instinctively, I closed my eyes and tilted my head to the side, pretending to still be unconscious. A strange survival instinct took over, a whisper in my mind telling me not to let them know I was awake. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. The door cracked open just an inch, and I heard their voices suddenly much clearer. "The paperwork for the insurance is already filed," my mother-in-law said, her tone calm, almost businesslike. "All we need now is the official confirmation." Confirmation of what? Confirmation of my death? I wanted to scream, but my throat refused to cooperate. Panic wrapped around my chest like a tight band, squeezing until it hurt to breathe. I kept my eyes shut, forcing myself to remain still while every instinct in my body begged me to sit up, to run, to fight. I heard a soft rustle of fabric. Someone peeked inside. "She looks the same," my sister-in-law whispered. "Honestly, I thought she'd be more pale." "Shh," her mother hissed. "The nurse could walk in any moment. Don't say anything stupid." I could feel their eyes on me, watching, assessing, waiting. I tried to listen, collecting every word like evidence, but my pulse was pounding too loudly in my ears. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. My husband's family might have disliked me. No, they did dislike me. But this, planning my funeral while I was still alive, filing insurance paperwork, talking about me like an object. This was something darker, something intentional, something planned, and most terrifying of all, where was my husband? Why wasn't he here? Why weren't they mentioning him? I forced myself to breathe quietly, shallowly, trying not to tremble. I didn't know how long they stood in the doorway, whispering to each other, but eventually their footsteps retreated, fading back into the hallway. Only when I could no longer hear them did I open my eyes again. The room suddenly felt like a trap. The IV line felt like a chain. The air felt poisonous. My mind raced, searching desperately for memories. The last thing I clearly remembered was being at home, cooking dinner while my husband scrolled on his phone at the kitchen table. I'd felt a little dizzy, a little nauseous, and then blackness, a blackout. A faint image flickered in my mind, a glass of water my husband brought me. A bitter aftertaste I brushed off as nothing. My stomach twisted. No, it couldn't be. He would never, would he? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to let myself think such a horrible thought. But the fear was growing inside me like a living thing. I tried to push myself up in bed, but pain shot through my ribs and the edges of my vision blurred. I had no strength. Whatever had been done to me or whatever had happened to me had left me fragile and weak. I reached for the call button near my pillow, my fingers trembling so badly they barely cooperated. I needed a nurse, someone safe, someone who wasn't part of this nightmare. But before I could press it, I heard another noise from outside, a different voice, a woman's. Calm, professional, warm, a nurse. My pulse slowed just a little. Then her words reached me, words that would change everything. But that was the moment the door handle began to turn, and I realized I wasn't ready. Not for the truth, not for the nurse, not for what she was about to say that would shatter the entire lie they'd built around me. The door opened slowly, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I didn't know if it would be the nurse or one of them, my mother-in-law with her cold eyes or my sister-in-law with her cruel smirk. I braced myself, forcing my breathing to stay shallow and even, pretending to be unconscious again. But then a soft voice filled the room. "Good morning, sweetheart. Let me check your vitals." It was the nurse, not them. Relief washed over me so suddenly I almost broke the act and looked at her. But I forced myself to stay still while she gently adjusted the monitor wires and touched my wrist with warm fingertips. Her touch alone felt like safety, like humanity, something I hadn't felt since I woke up. She murmured, reading the small screen. "Your heart rate is elevated. Poor thing. Must have had a stressful night." If only she knew. I wanted to open my eyes, to beg her for help, to tell her everything I had heard. But something held me back, a sharp intuition telling me to wait just one more moment. Something was coming. I could feel it. And I was right. Just as the nurse finished adjusting the IV, the door swung open again, this time with a force that made the metal hinge creak. I didn't need to see them to know who it was. Their perfume hit first, my mother-in-law's suffocating floral scent, and my sister-in-law's overly sweet coconut body spray. They were back. "Oh," the nurse said, her tone polite but not exactly welcoming. "I was just checking her vitals." My mother-in-law's voice sliced through the room like a blade. "You can go. We'll take it from here." The nurse didn't move. "She is still very unstable. She needs rest and very minimal stress." "Rest?" My sister-in-law scoffed. "How much more rest does she need? She's practically—" A sharp elbow hit her, and she stopped mid-sentence. But I had already heard enough to make my stomach twist. "Practically what? Practically dead?" the nurse's voice firmed. "You have 5 minutes. Then she needs complete quiet." They didn't answer. Instead, the nurse stepped out, but the door didn't close all the way. It stayed cracked open. And I realized something. She had left it like that on purpose. Once the echo of her footsteps faded down the hall, the room filled with the low hum of machines and the soft rustling of clothes. My mother-in-law stepped closer. I could feel her presence like poison in the air. "Look at her," she whispered, still pretending to cling to life. Pathetic. I almost reacted then. My fingers twitched under the blanket, but I forced myself to remain still, to keep that thin thread of deception intact. I needed to hear everything. I needed answers. My sister-in-law walked around to the other side of the bed. I could feel her gaze burning into my skin. "Do you think she can hear us?" "Of course not," her mother snapped. "The doctor said she's barely conscious, and soon she won't be conscious at all." Then came the words that made my blood run cold. "Once the toxicology report is finalized, everything will be over." Toxicology. My heart stuttered. Were they testing my blood for poison? My mother-in-law lowered her voice even further. "The doctors already think she overdosed. They think she did this to herself. It's perfect." Overdosed? Did this to herself? The realization hit me like a violent punch to the chest. Someone had staged this. Someone drugged me. Someone wanted the doctors to think it was self-inflicted. Someone wanted me out of the way. And my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were not shocked about it. They were relieved, comfortable, prepared, which meant they either knew who did it or they were part of it. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might vomit. My sister-in-law scoffed softly. "I just want this to be over. We can't do anything with the house until we get the death certificate. And Mom, did you forget? We still need her signature for the transfer." "She signed it," the older woman hissed. "Trust me." A cold sweat broke out along my spine. I never signed anything. Never. So what did she mean? A forged signature? A manipulated document? Something done while I was unconscious? My mother-in-law continued, voice dripping with disdain. "As soon as her husband gets here, we'll handle the rest." At that moment, my world narrowed into a single point. Her husband. My husband. They were waiting for him. They were working with him. They were all in it together. I felt a choking pressure rise in my chest. Not grief, not even fear, but betrayal so sharp it felt physical. A memory flashed through my mind. The bitter taste in the water he had handed me. The way he had watched me as I drank it. The way he hadn't touched his own glass. My hand twitched again. I tightened every muscle in my body and forced myself back into stillness. I couldn't break the act. Not now. Not when I was finally starting to see the outlines of the truth. They talked for several more minutes, whispering in that vile, hopeful tone, planning, waiting, anticipating the moment I would stop breathing. I memorized every word like evidence I would one day use against them. Then, abruptly, the door opened fully. The nurse stood there. Her expression was polite, but her eyes were not. They were sharp, analytical, and for the first time since waking up, I felt something fierce and fragile spark inside me. Hope. "Your 5 minutes are up," she said firmly. My mother-in-law bristled. "We weren't finished." "You are now," the nurse said, stepping inside. "Please step out. She needs medical care, not conversations about arrangements." The pause before that last word was deliberate. The two women stiffened. For a brief moment, no one moved. The tension in the room snapped tight like a wire. Then, with a scoff and a glare, they finally left. The nurse closed the door behind them. And then she did something unexpected. She came to my bedside, leaned in close and whispered, "I know you're awake." My heart nearly stopped. I kept my eyes closed, terrified, unsure of her intentions. "You're safe," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "But you need to listen carefully. Someone changed the information in your medical record, and I don't think it was an accident." My breath caught. This was it, the beginning, the truth, the first crack in the nightmare they'd built around me. "Don't move," she whispered. "Don't react. I will come back in 10 minutes, and when I do, I'm going to tell you exactly what they've done." And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me trembling. Not from fear this time, but from the terrifying, fragile hope that I wasn't powerless after all. The moment the nurse left the room, silence pressed in from every angle. But this time, it wasn't the same cold, suffocating silence I'd woken up to. This silence was loaded, heavy, expectant, because now I knew something. Someone had changed my medical records. Someone had tried to bury me alive, literally and legally. And the nurse knew it. I lay there, pretending to sleep. But my mind was racing so wildly it was a miracle I didn't faint. My thoughts were spinning in chaotic circles. What did they change? What did the doctors believe happened to me? How close had I come to actually dying because of those lies? But the most horrifying question of all kept clawing at me. Was my husband a part of this? I tried to replay the last moments I remembered before everything went black. The bitter water, his unreadable expression, the way he kept glancing at his phone, the dizziness that hit too fast, too hard to be normal. It all pointed to one thing. He knew. He knew exactly what would happen after I drank that water. My chest tightened, and for a moment I felt like I couldn't breathe. I forced myself to take shallow breaths because I needed to stay calm, if only for a few more minutes, until the nurse returned. And then, footsteps. Not hers. Heavier, familiar. My blood froze. My husband. I didn't have to open my eyes to know. I recognized the cadence of his walk, the way his shoes clicked sharply against the hospital floor. I had heard that rhythm in our hallway, in our kitchen, everywhere in the home we shared. My first instinct was to open my eyes and demand answers. But the stronger instinct, the one born from pure survival, kept me still. If he was part of this plot, then the most dangerous thing I could do was alert him that I was awake. The door opened with a slow creak, and his voice, so calm, so gentle it sounded rehearsed, filled the room. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm here." The tenderness in his tone made bile rise in my throat. He moved closer. I felt his hand brush the blanket near my arm, not quite touching me. He never touched without a purpose. And his lack of contact now confirmed it. The tenderness was a performance, meant for anyone who might be listening. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. Sorry? For what he did or because I didn't die? I should have seen the signs. I didn't know you were so unstable. Unstable. The word hit me like a slap. So that was the narrative. That was the lie they were feeding the doctors, that I had tried to harm myself, that I was the cause of my own collapse. I felt my pulse hammering against the inside of my wrist, threatening to give me away. But I forced myself to stay still, unmoving, breathing evenly, just like before. He pulled up the chair beside the bed and sat down. I heard the leather cushion groan under his weight. "I talked to the doctor," he continued softly. "He said it's not looking good." A pause, a long one. Then he exhaled shakily. But it was wrong, too controlled, too deliberate to be real grief. If you don't make it through the night." There it was, the truth behind his visit. He wasn't here to comfort me. He was here to confirm I wouldn't ruin the plan. "I just want you to know I forgive you." Forgive me. Forgive me for what? For being alive? My fingers curled slightly under the blanket, hidden from view. Rage simmered inside me, hot, sharp, full of clarity I hadn't felt since waking up. I stayed still, but every cell in my body was screaming. He leaned closer. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "And I promise I'll take care of everything. The house, the insurance. Mom and Lisa will help me." The insurance. So he was part of it. Fully. Willingly. Actively. My heartbreak solidified into something else. Something stronger. Something that kept me from breaking into pieces. Survival. He sat there a few more minutes, muttering things that were meant to sound heartbreaking and loving, but instead felt like poison dripping into my ears. Then, finally, his chair scraped against the floor. "I'll be back later," he said softly, "for the final updates." Final. Like I wasn't a person, but a task. He left, and the moment the door closed behind him, I dared to open my eyes just a sliver, just enough to watch his silhouette disappear down the hallway. He never once looked back. 10 minutes passed, maybe less, maybe more. Everything blurred into one long, suffocating moment of fear and clarity. Then the door eased open again, quiet, cautious, and the nurse slipped inside. She checked the hallway first, making sure no one was watching. Then she closed the door behind her and came to my bedside. She didn't speak at first. She simply placed her hand gently on my arm. "Open your eyes," she whispered. "It's okay." And I did. Her eyes widened for a moment, like she hadn't expected me to actually obey. Then she exhaled in relief. "There you are," she murmured. Good. You're stronger than they think." I tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out. My throat was still raw, and my voice barely a whisper. How long was I out?" She shook her head. "Days. You were heavily sedated, and not by us." My heart dropped. "What do you mean? Who?" She lowered her voice to a whisper so quiet I could barely hear it. "Someone added medication orders to your file. Dangerous dosages. Something only a doctor is allowed to write." "And did a doctor—" "No." Her jaw tightened. "Someone forged one." My breath caught. Forging medical orders wasn't just dangerous. It was lethal, premeditated. The nurse continued. "And when you were brought in, the person who checked you in told the ER you had a history of depression and previous attempts." My voice cracked. I never." "I know," she said gently. "That's why I checked the access logs. Someone logged into your chart using a physician's account. Someone who shouldn't have access." I stared at her, my pulse thundering in my ears. "Who?" I whispered. She glanced at the door again, making sure we were still alone. Then she leaned even closer. "The login came from outside the hospital, and the name attached to it—" She hesitated. Her eyes softened. "It's the same last name as your husband." My entire world tilted. I felt the bed sway under me. I felt my stomach lurch. I felt the truth crash into me like a train. He hadn't just participated. He orchestrated it. And my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they weren't just cruel. They were accomplices. The nurse pressed her hand on mine. "I believe someone tried to kill you, and I'm going to help you stay alive." I stared at her, my voice trembling, but the question came out steady. "What do I do now?" Her answer was quiet. "You disappear before they finish the job." When the nurse said I needed to disappear, I didn't fully understand what she meant. Not until I saw the fear in her eyes, real fear, the kind that came from knowing how close I had come to dying. Not metaphorically, literally. She leaned closer, speaking fast but quietly, as if the walls themselves were listening. "You're not safe here," she whispered. "If they manipulated your chart once, they can do it again. If they convinced the ER you overdosed, they can convince an attending to increase your medication. All it takes is one false order, one wrong dosage, and nobody would ever question it." A chill slid through me, deeper and colder than anything I had felt before. I wasn't just a victim. I was a target. Why would they do this?" I whispered, though the truth was already forming in my mind like a shadow. The nurse didn't sugarcoat it. "For money," she said. "For property, for convenience. People kill for far less." My throat tightened, and my husband, the man I had loved, the man whose ring I wore, had done this to me. She continued, "I'm going to buy you time, but you need to stay silent and still until I come back. Do you understand?" I nodded weakly. She squeezed my hand once, firmly, then left the room, slipping out like a ghost. The door closed softly, but the moment she was gone, panic settled over me again. What if he came back? What if his mother walked in? What if they realized I was awake? I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. My mind raced through scenario after scenario, each one worse than the last. But there was one thought louder than all the others. I need to get out alive. Minutes passed like hours. Then footsteps. Several. Voices. Too many. My breath caught. The door handle rattled. My body stiffened. I shut my eyes, pretending to be unconscious again. The door opened. "Oh," my mother-in-law said sharply. "She's still out." My sister-in-law clicked her tongue. "Good." Maybe we won't have to wait much longer. Did you talk to the doctor? The older woman whispered. Yes, he said the sedative level in her system is dropping faster than expected. Something about her metabolism. A pause. Then we need to speed things up. I felt my stomach drop. They stepped closer to my bed. I felt the air shift. My sister-in-law murmured, "Should we tell him she's still alive? Or wait?" "Wait," her mother said coldly. "He's on his way, and the insurance adjuster wants confirmation tonight. Everything needs to happen before midnight." Insurance adjuster. Midnight. They were planning a deadline for my death. My hands trembled under the blanket, but I forced myself to stay motionless. They lingered for another minute, whispering to each other, then finally left. When the door shut behind them, I let out a shaky breath I didn't even know I was holding. A minute passed. 2. 5. Then, the nurse returned. She closed the door behind her, locked it, and moved quickly to the window, pulling the blinds down. "It's worse than I thought," she whispered. "Your family asked the attending physician to increase your medication. They want you sedated all night." My breath caught. That's when they'll do it," she continued. "After visiting hours, after the nurses decrease their rounds. They'll make it look like you went into cardiac arrest in your sleep." My vision blurred with tears. "Please," I whispered. "Help me." "I am," she said softly. "But you have to trust me." "I do." She nodded, then reached into her pocket and took out a folded piece of paper. "This is your real chart," she said quietly. "The unedited one. I printed it before the changes disappear from the system. You're going to need proof." I stared at it, terrified and grateful all at once. Then she did something even riskier. She disconnected my IV. I gasped. "Won't they notice?" "No," she said. "I changed the logs. They'll think you're still receiving meds. You're going to be weak, but you can move. Can you stand?" My heart pounded. Could I? "I'll try." She helped me sit up. Pain stabbed through my ribs and chest, but pain meant I was alive enough to fight. With her help, I slowly lowered my legs off the bed. My feet touched the cold floor. My knees almost buckled. "You can do this," she whispered. "It's your life. Fight for it." I nodded. Every nerve in my body screamed, but I forced myself to stand. She quietly retrieved a wheelchair she had parked outside earlier and guided me into it. Then she draped a blanket over me and handed me a surgical mask. "Keep your head down. Look as sick as possible." "Shouldn't be hard," I whispered. Her lips twitched in a sad smile. She cracked the door open, checked the hallway, then pushed me out casually, like she was simply transferring a patient. No one questioned her. Halfway to the elevator, I heard it. My husband's voice. I froze, trembling so hard it rattled the wheelchair. "Where's my wife?" he demanded from down the hall. "She's resting," a nurse replied. "Visiting hours aren't for another—" "I need to see her now." His voice was sharp, frantic, not with worry, but with urgency. The nurse pushing me whispered quickly, "Don't look up. Don't breathe. Don't move." We passed a junction in the corridor just as my husband appeared on the other side. He was only a few feet away. If I lifted my head even an inch, he would see me. He stormed in the opposite direction, heading right toward my room. The doors closed behind him. We reached the elevator. The doors slid open. The nurse pushed me inside, stepped in with me, and hit the button for the basement parking garage. As the elevator descended, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "Almost there," she said softly. "Once we reach the garage, my friend will drive you to a safe place. We'll call the police from there, not from the hospital. If we call from here, someone will intercept it." Tears streamed down my cheeks. "Why are you helping me?" I whispered. She hesitated, then said, "Because someone once helped me, and because nobody deserves to die the way they plan to kill you." The elevator stopped. The doors opened to darkness and the distant echo of cars. Freedom, safety, a future. As she pushed me out into the garage, she leaned down and whispered, "You're not dying tonight, not on their terms." And for the first time since I woke up in that cold, sterile room, I believed her. I was going to live. And they were going to face the truth. The real funeral being planned would not be mine, but the funeral of every lie they told, every plan they made, every secret they buried. Because I wasn't disappearing forever. I was coming back to destroy everything they built on my grave.